When I became chancellor, I had a theory of change that to me would guide everything I would do. And that was that a place like New York City public school system is this large, massive bureaucracy, wrapped in politics, unions, bureaucrats, the whole 9 yards. But what's education about? It happens to be about a unit called a school. And so right from the beginning, we call, I think, Children First, a system of great schools, not a great school system. And we were trying to convey something that was really powerful, which was, in the end, whether New York had a great system or not doesn't matter. It's whether the schools that comprise the system are great. And a lot of schools were, and a whole hell of a lot more weren't when we started. And so this number one theory of change was I wanted to create more good schools, and I wanted all schools to improve, but I was not interested in the so-called systemic issues. There were 2 or 3 things that drove that theory of change. One piece was charter schools. So that was already like weird, because I'm running a public school system, and that's one principal once wrote me, you're giving up market share voluntarily to the charters. But my theory was, in order to get as many good schools, I wanted to get as many good school operators into the game. And that meant bringing in the Dave Levins and the Daisha Tolles and the Norm Atkins and Eva Moskowitzes and all these other people. And by the same token, on the public school side, where I was shutting down schools that were failing and replacing them, it meant bringing in the Bob Hugheses and the Richard Kahns and the other groups that we partner with. And my view was, if Richard Kahn wants to run public schools and Norm Atkins wants to run charter schools, God bless both of them, as long as my kids get good schools. And that created a system that increased the schools. All the schools we opened, almost without exception, we opened up some 700 schools, were schools of choice. The charters by law. And most of the publics we opened were schools of choice. And so we said to these people, you got to earn your kids. Now that's rare in public. Usually you have a catchment area. The kids come to you automatically because it's one and done. But our theory was, let them earn it. And so you saw that some of the charters didn't work. They didn't earn their kids. We had to shut them down. Some of the public schools didn't work that we opened. We had a district public school. We had to shut them down. But overall, overwhelmingly, these schools started to work because they had to work to survive. And that drew talent, that drew kids, that created a virtuous cycle. Most school chiefs don't like controversy. And my whole thinking from the day I took this job is, I'm not a career superintendent. I wasn't looking to move from New York to this one, to go to that one, to that one. But if you don't disrupt and you change very little is going to change. You know, there's this kind of hoping and wishing thing, and everybody can get along together rather than upset people. And I upset a lot of people, and I made some mistakes. But I knew if we weren't ready, for example, to bring in charter schools, that was necessarily going to mean we were depriving kids of lots of new opportunities. By the same token, I knew that the unions and the bureaucrats, a lot of the people in the system were saying, why would you bring in charter schools? So that's necessarily controversial. Shutting down schools. Just a study a couple of weeks ago came out on how successful that was. But at the time, it was pretty brutal. So most people who want to be careerists in this game, in the superintendency game, are unlikely to be sufficiently, in my view, aggressive to really make the fundamental kind of change. And I always say to people, if you change very little will change. And that's the key to what I think we did in New York, certainly followed by what Michelle did and others did, John White's not doing, Kevin Huffman did, other people. But the people who stand out in my mind are the people who made the big changes, many of which worked really well, some didn't. But when you make big changes, not everything works well. You keep the status quo, the one thing I know you can expect is the same lousy results that kids saw for years in New York, Chicago, Boston, and so forth. I came to know Eva when I was literally the chancellor, and she was chair of the education committee on the council. And sometimes with justification, sometimes without justification. She beat me up pretty hard. So we didn't go into this as 2 people who were kind of sort of romantically inclined to work together. We were 2 people who were trying to figure out our respective roles. When, after the union, she did her hearings on the contract, which were defining in the city and defining nationally. When people really got to see what's in this teacher's contract and in some of the other contracts, I think they were genuinely shocked. As a result of that, what happened is the union in her 2005 race to be Manhattan Borough President basically threw everything it had to put a stop to her. After that, she thought about what she would do and literally came talk to me and others, and we talked about a lot of different things. She decided she wanted to open charter schools and create the very proof point you're talking about. And there were two things I knew about Eva. One, she wouldn't do onesies and twosies. It was not likely to be a small endeavor. It's not the way she thinks. And second of all, success is something, not just by the name of the place, but success is something that's so paramount to her. And she's so driven by it. So that made me think this is an opportunity to take to scale something real. And so right from day one, whatever real estate she needed, the key ingredient she needed was to have places to put her schools. And as a result of that, I, my team, Mark Sternberg, John White, we committed ourselves to her to get as much space as we could so she could open up as many schools. And we did that successfully. Now that caused a lot of pushback. You know, you say it's a proof point, but let me tell you, it's a proof point people don't want. Everybody's out there trying to prove that it isn't real because it raises the very difficult question is if it's happening, it's success, why isn't it happening in PSX or PSY? And with the same kids and the same challenges, dramatically different results. And so what you see, instead of the response that you wish you would see, is people going in droves to learn about what Eva Moskowitz is doing. There's these personal attacks on her. There's this whole effort to say she doesn't get the exact same kids. So let's assume she doesn't get the exact same kids. So instead of getting 2.5, 3 times as good of results, let's just take it down to 2 times as good of results. You'd think people would pray for that. But no, in education, it's about politics. It's always about who's in control, who has the power. And so Eva has become the poster child for success and therefore the poster child for somebody that has to be beat. And that's what's so crazy. If anybody was worrying about the kids in this city, they would be out there killing themselves to help Eva Moskowitz open up more and more and more and more schools because we know the results of those schools, and it's across the board. It's not like she's got 1 or 2 great schools. She's got dozens of great schools outperforming everybody, outperforming middle-class neighborhoods. So you would think any place but in the world of education, people would be trying to replicate, scale, build what she's doing, and instead she's become this kind of subject of attack. And that's just because, again, it's about the politics, not about the kids. I started with this principle that I wanted New York to be the Silicon Valley for charter schools. I went out personally and recruited people like Dacia and Norm and Dave Levin and others to come to New York. And the big barrier, this is a matter of law. The operating monies, while they weren't as high as they should have been, the operating monies for charter schools in New York were reasonable. The big problem was that they had no capital money. So as a result of that, if they had to go lease space, they were already getting less money for operations than the traditional schools. But if they have to lease space, that comes out of their operating monies. So what I was saying, look, we have space in the public schools. My theory is the space belongs to the kids. It doesn't belong to me or to the school building or anything like that. It belongs to the kids. So if a kid's in a public school, she takes up X amount of square feet. If she's in a private school, in a charter school, she takes up X amount of square feet. And my theory was the space should follow the kid just like the dollars should follow the kid. And so we made this space available for charter schools. That enabled them to flourish. The other things that we did were, first of all, they knew they had a chancellor who would fight for them when the cap came up in the legislature so they wouldn't get stymied. We made changes on the way they were reimbursed for special education. And we pushed them to be held increasingly accountable, and actually the good charter schools wanted that. But in essence, within the law, we did everything we could to support the growth and development of the good ones, just like we did with Richard Kahn and Bob Hughes. Bob Hughes was getting lots of space from us to open up traditional public high schools. Of course, that was less noisy because the union didn't object as much when you're opening up a school that they unionized, or Richard Kahn. But the whole theory, again, goes back to, Romy, what I was talking about, which was I wanted as many great schools, and I wanted to make it easy for people like Dave Levin to run great schools, and everything we could do to get that done, we did. The unit that matters in public education is a school. That's where you send your kids, that's where I send my kids, that's what people care about. In order to get education right in America, every kid's got to be in a good school. You can't have some, you can't say some of the schools are good or some of them are not. So if you want to change that, go do schools. That's the unit that matters. And if you want to have impact on the kids' lives, think all those kids that Eva has now changed the arc of their lives because of the work she's done. So if you want to do, people often today say to me, young people, people in my office here, I want to do something meaningful. I want to change the world. You want to change the world, create great schools for kids, be fearless like Eva is in scaling it, and constantly create the improvement loop that will make it better and better. Go learn from others who are doing things, but constantly do that. And in the end, it's hard to imagine a more rewarding thing than opening a school in a high poverty community, typically children of color, and changing the arc of those kids' lives. Boy, I tell you, when you get to the pearly gates and St. Peter's asks you what you did, you don't have to apologize and say, I ran a great school in a high poverty community.